We got through it 3 times. We did well.
Yeah.
And by the way, Rhonda, you do very well.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you
did
for
very
saying that.
well.
All right, here we are, verse 21. Continuing the offspring. Now, just before we read 21, you will recall that just less than a year earlier, Joseph had said to his brothers, "Don't come back again without your little brother." And they said, "It's only the 10 of us because our one brother is gone and the other brother is young and can't travel, and we can't break our dad's heart by taking that youngster away." And let's see how old he is when we read verse 21.
So either they lied or a lot of time passed.
Uvnei Vinyamin, Bela, Vavecher, Vaashbel, Gera, Venaaman, Echi, Verosh, Mupim, Vechupim, Vaard. This little baby boy has all of these sons.
Amazing.
And from my understanding, it takes some time to produce this many boys.
Unless you had that many wives.
Either, he had one wife for each boy, and he was a 15-year-old father of all of them.
Or considerable time has passed, yeah.
And or
Hundreds of years.
something is up with this whole previous story. But remember, the story about he's too young and he can't travel and he couldn't be with us was all the red story.
Mhm.
Oh,
And since Joseph left Benjamin, 30 years have passed. So Joseph it's 13 years. Joseph was 17 when he left, and now it's 13 years later. And again, we don't get a good sense of how old was Joseph when Benjamin was born.
Mhm.
So in the blue story, there's been plenty of time for Benjamin to have a whole bunch of kids, again, with possibly more than one wife. Again, the issue of names and punctuation and conjunctions in Hebrew causes some availability to commentary. So the sons of Benjamin, are they Bela and Bacher?
Mm.
And why the Va, Vecher? Are they twins?
Mm.
And thus they're the Va rather than the V.
Oh,
And
is
then
that the
there's-
difference? Is that why you'd say that?
Well, biblically, probably just because of the way in which the Vav was connected to the letter that came after. So sometimes it's V, sometimes it's Va, sometimes it's U.
But
But
when it's
since-
va, why does it change the meaning?
Well, Vavecher is just easier to say than Vivecher.
Okay, so it might not be.
However, since the Va is less common and the Va appears in other places, tohu vavohu,
ah,
it appears in some paired sets.
Oh,
The fact that it might have been just easier to say by the biblical orator would not dissuade the rabbis from making up a bunch of stories about why it's a different word.
I see.
You see that later in the sentence also between other names.
Exactly. So
They could just have-
rabbis get to, we could say his sons were Bela and Vecher, the twins. And then we have Ve'ashbel Gera. So is it Ashbel Gera
Mm.
or Ashbel Kama Gera?
Yeah.
And to get that clue, we can look at the trope, which tells us whether we sing them as two words together or separate words. But that doesn't really give us a clue as to the story because the trope is made up later.
Oh.
But it's more likely it's
The
one
trope made the
person with
decision.
a double name, right?
We don't get a lot of first and middle names in Torah-itic naming.
But last week we did. We had it
Well,
once.
we get indications that they might have.
I don't see any trope.
Yeah, I got rid of all the tropes, so you don't know. Because
And
that
this-
way, there's no trope in the Torah in addition to, of course, no vowels.
Yeah.
So
when
the
you're
person
reading
who
the
set the
Torah-
trope made the decision of what she thought it meant.
They received a tradition that it was Ashbel Geira or Ashbel Geira. So it's a received tradition that they wrote the trope to reflect the received tradition. But we don't know that the received tradition is in fact exactly the same as the original orator.
Mm.
So we get and then the next one, Naaman Echi. Or is it Naaman and then Echi Varosh?
Mm.
Or is it Naaman Echi Varosh?
Does
That's
Naaman have a meaning?
Well, all of these have meanings that were understood probably by the biblical audience, but were not given the meanings in the list of names.
But the way you put the before, the Varosh, that could also be, like you said before, like a twin.
Right, but is Rosh the twin of Echi, and Naaman is a separate boy,
Yeah.
or is Rosh the twin of Naaman Echi?
I
Yeah.
vote for that one.
Maybe it's my brother.
And then is it Rosh Mupim or Rosh and Mupim?
Yeah.
So is it Naaman Echi and Rosh Mupim? And they're twins. And again, whether you make them twins and whether you make them middle names will in fact change the possible time frame of when these kids were born and how many kids are there.
Yes.
I think Benjamin like to have kids with middle names. That's what I think.
And had a bunch of twins.
And a bunch of twins.
But when they count the number of Israelites who started in Egypt,
Yes.
isn't that a little of a clue?
It is a little bit, however, the numbers are larger than the names that are listed.
Yeah.
Even slightly.
Because the numbers would include the wives of some of the kids and the wives of the.
So we don't know anything then.
Exactly. And then you've got Hupim Va'ard. So is it and Hupim and Ard the twins?
Well, you know, twins runs in the family.
In some families, and certainly if we read them as twins, then we know in Benjamin's wife's family, there would have been a predilection towards twins.
Yeah, but would the women have survived them? Survived so many twins? That's the question.
Well, I don't know. Rivka said, why am I even living if I'm going to carry twins like this?
Yeah, but Jacob was a twin.
Yes, and his mom said when the kids were fighting each other in the womb, said, Im ze lama ze anochi. If this is the way it's going to be, why am I even here?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why Benjamin has twins, because his father had twins too.
So that's the Benjamin
Those are
children.
fraternal twins.
Grandfather, his grandfather.
Identical twins aren't genetically reproduced.
Right. They're freaks of nature.
Yeah,
Or
gift.
modern
How about a
technology.
gift of nature?
Yeah. Or modern technology.
Yeah, so those are apt to be fraternal.
Yes. And there's no statement here as to whether they are identical or fraternal.
Yeah.
And,
If
and
they're
because if
twins
any
here.
of them had been girls, they wouldn't have been named.
Right. So that's the family of Benjamin. And since Benjamin is the only child that's with Jacob of Mama Rachel, we have exhausted the list of the Rachel kids.
Yeah.
Whereas the Leah kids took a lot longer to name.
Yeah.
And the Bilka and Zilpah kids take a little bit longer to name. So 22, Ele b'nei Rachel, Asher yulad liYakov, Kol nefesh arba'a asar. So these are the sons of Rachel that she bore to Jacob. Each soul, every soul, 14. So no matter how you divide those kids up, there's not 14 of them.
Can you break up Arba'a is actually,
Arba'a is 4 and Asar is 10.
that's what I thought. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay.
In Hebrew, teens begin at 11.
That's because the men at 13.
Well, in English, teens begin at 13 because we have a duodecimal system for naming. But in Hebrew, 11 is Achad Asar, which is 110. And then Shtem Asar, 210. And then Arba'a Asar, 410. So an 11-year-old is a 1-teen.
Mm.
Uvene Dan, and now we're going to another side of the family. Uvene Dan, Chushim, and the sons of Dan are Chushim.
Why do they have that? Why do they have sons if it's only one kid?
Well, because Dan only had one kid, but we're in a form of sons of sons of sons of sons of sons.
Okay.
Yeah, so the sons of Dan are 1. Uvene Naphtali, his full brother, Yachseel, Vaguni, Vyetzer, Vashilem. And you notice they are all separated with ands.
Mhm.
And Dan and Naphtali are the sons of the maidservant Bilhah, which is what verse 25 now tells us. Ela b'nei Bilhah. So we got the sons of Leah. Then we got the sons of Zilpah, the maidservant of Leah. Then we get the sons of Rachel. Then we get the sons of Bilhah, the maidservant of Rachel. So 25, Ela b'nei Bilhah, Asher natan Lavan l'Rachel, Bito, Vateled et Ela l'Yakov, Kol nefesh Shiva.
Okay, so this is my confusion. These are the sons of Bilhah that she gave to Lavan.
That she gave, that Lavan gave
Oh, that Lavan gave.
to Rachel.
Yeah, I don't understand how Lavan gave it to Rachel.
Lavan gave Bilhah to Rachel as her maidservant.
So these are the sons of Bilhah that Lavan gave.
To Rachel, his daughter. Remember when Leah got married, she got Zilpah as a maidservant that Lavan gave to Leah as her maidservant.
Well, why would she give sons to Rachel?
No,
These are
Lavan
the
gave
sons Bilhah.
Bilhah to Rachel.
But it says these sons Bilhah that.
Put the comma
Bilhah being the
after-
one.
Put the comma after the word sons. These
These
sons.
sons.
Sons of
No, no,
Bilhah.
these are the
Bilhah.
sons of Bilhah
Bilhah was
Right.
given to Rachel.
that Lavan gave to Rachel, Bito, comma.
Right.
So that
Why is
Bilhah
Bilhah? Why
is the
did
one.
Lavan give the sons of Bilhah to?
No, he didn't give the sons. He gave Bilhah.
Oh,
Bilhah.
These are let's make it even stronger than a comma. Ela b'nei Bilhah, parentheses, Asher natan Lavan l'Rachel Bito, close parentheses. These are the sons of Bilhah. Parenthetically, Bilhah is the one that Lavan gave to
Oh, I got
Rachel,
it.
his daughter.
so now he's saying Bilhah, who he gave to Rachel as a maidservant, these are her sons.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Vateled, and she bore. So we're back to Bilhah.
Okay, thank you.
And she bore at Ela these to Yaakov. And all of them counted up are 7. But there's Chushim, Then there's Yachzeel 2, Guni 3, Yetzer 4, and Shilem 5, and all of that together is 7.
So are they like half brothers of Rachel?
I mean, they're half sons. They're not sons of Rachel at all.
No, but aren't they Jacob's sons?
Jacob's sons through Bilhah.
Right. So that means that they're half brother and sisters
Mhm.
to Rachel.
No, to Rachel's kids.
To Rachel's children.
They were,
Right.
They're the next generation. They're the same generation as Yosef and
Okay, I
Judah.
got it. I'm getting all these names. I'm getting Levon.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are the half brothers of everybody else,
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
and full brothers to each other.
Okay.
But all of these souls that are named 5 are 7. So verse 26, Kol hanefesh haba'a liYaakov mitzrayma. So every soul that comes to Jacob, that came to Jacob, that was now seeded from Jacob, coming down towards Egypt, Yotzei Yerecho, the ones who came out of his loins, so he is the full father of all of them. Milvad Neshei V'nei Yaakov, not counting the wives or the women, plural, of the sons of Jacob.
not counting is
Milvad, except for, or aside from.
Hmm.
So we're not quite sure what the counting's being done of. The wives of the sons of Jacob.
Nesh, Nesh,
V'shei V'nei Yaakov, the wives of the sons of Jacob.
Mm.
Kol nefesh, and so all the souls that come down, the total entourage retinue of Jacob going down to Egypt is Shishim V'shesh, 60 and 6.
66.
So Jacob is now traveling down to Egypt, with a group of 66 people.
Hmm.
Well, that's not counting his daughters-in-law.
Correct.
Oh, okay,
That's what it says.
right, okay.
And we have to figure out, where did those other numbers come from?
Well, did they come or they just weren't counted? I mean, did they not
Well, they
count?
come, yes. They came. This is an enumeration
Mhm,
of the number that comes down to Egypt with Jacob,
mhm.
outside of or except for the wives of the sons, his sons.
Mhm.
They could be manservants or his,
Well, again, the fact that he's got a bunch of daughters that aren't named. Only one daughter is named because she has a fun story that we
Yeah.
read this past week.
They hadn't invented a family tree diagram.
No, it's not. I certainly don't list it. They transmit it orally. (27) Uvenei Yosef asher yulad lo b'Mitzrayim nefesh shnayim kol hanefesh levet Yaakov haba'a Mitzrayma shiv'im.
Wow.
One more.
So Uvenei Yosef, and the sons of Joseph, asher yulad lo b'Mitzrayim, that were born to him in Egypt, nefesh shnayim, a soul of 2, or 2 souls. So we know he has 2 sons down there. So kol hanefesh levet Yaakov. So now every soul, every person in the house of Jacob, haba'a Mitzrayma, that comes to Egypt, that comes towards Egypt, that lands in Egypt, is shiv'im. So it would seem that Asnat is being counted in the Joseph group,
Hmm.
because there's 4 of them already down there. 66 come down, and 4 of them are down there waiting for them. And the 4 of them who are waiting for them are Joseph and his wife, Asnat, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, her full title, and their 2 kids, Manasseh and Ephraim.
So that's where they added them on already, even though they weren't. Okay.
They didn't travel down to Egypt, they're already there waiting. So now they're down in Egypt in the blue story, and we go back to the red story and they're not there yet.
Mhm.
Ve'et Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef lahorot lefanav Goshna vayavohu artsa Goshen.
Vayavo'u, right?
So vayavohu, correct. Artsa Goshen. Ve'et Yehuda, now Judah shalach. So Judah was sent, because it's et Yehuda is so sent Judah. He sent Judah. We are not quite sure where that comes from by reading the story as one solid piece, but we're sure where it came from if we go all the way back to where we left off in the Y story rather than the red, because we're talking about what Jacob sends down to Egypt to prepare for the travels. So Jacob sends Judah, and of course we're back to a Judah story. Jacob sends Judah, so ve'et Yehuda shalach. He sent Judah lifanav, before him, el Yosef, to Joseph, lahorot lifanav Goshna, to, now here lahorot, actually the root is to teach,
Oh,
but the translations usually read it as to show, from seeing. But it could be showing as in a GPS.
hmm.
Judah gets sent ahead to mark the trail, to teach or demonstrate how to get to Goshen. So Judah is leading the way of all these people who are not numbered in the red story, are just Jacob and all of his kids are now, and all of his manservants and maidservants and whatever else he's got, and all of his flocks and whatever he's got. They're all heading down to Goshen in the wagons that were sent up to him by Joseph and Pharaoh. So Jacob's got the wagon train set up, and he sends Judah ahead to mark the trail.
Where is Goshen in relation to Egypt?
Goshen is over in the eastern side of the Nile Delta.
How did land Goshen come up as a phrase?
That's it, because that was the grazing land.
Okay.
And it's on the other side of the river because the Egyptians didn't want to have to deal with all those cattle.
So it's like a suburb of Egypt?
Well,
You never said,
it's part of Egypt,
Mhm.
but it's the East Bank.
so does that mean it was in what we would consider Africa now?
Well, I mean, all of Egypt is in Africa, but it's west of the Suez Canal. So, I mean, a question, where does Africa and Asia and Europe really divide into each other when you get to the Middle East?
Yeah.
It's been going on for a while.
Ever since the continents drifted apart. So Judah gets sent ahead to mark the trail toward Goshen, Vayavohu Artsa Goshen, and so now they all come toward the land of Goshen.
What is Artsah?
Hmm. Artsa is toward the Eretz, or to the Eretz.
To land.
Remember that ending, Mitzrayma,
Yeah.
All of those things mean we're heading in that direction. Goshen word. So Goshen becomes Goshna. Vayasur Yosef Merkavto. And now they're coming down. Joseph gets a text message from Judah to know they're arriving in Goshen. And Joseph saddles up his chariot. So everybody else has an agala, a wagon. Joseph's got a merkava.
Faster.
He gets on the Goshen commuter rail. So Vayasur Yosef Merkavto, Vaya'al Likrat Yisrael Aviv Goshna, Vayera Elav, Vayipol Al Tzavarav, Vayevk Al Tzavarav Od. And it's a good thing we just read this week's Torah portion last week, because we had the displaced pronouns in this week's Torah portion when Jacob and Esau unite, and he kisses him, he falls on his neck. We don't have a statement of who is the he and who is the him, who's initiating, whether there's reciprocating. And once again, in this particular story, we don't have a clear statement as to who initiated, whether it was reciprocated, who did what to whom. The interesting thing, contrasting this week's Torah portion, which was earlier to what we're reading, and this, is when Jacob and Esau are on each other's neck doing whatever they're doing, it says Vayivku, and they wept. And here it's going to say he wept. So we really have no idea. But in any case, back to the rest of 29, the chariot is already Vaya'al Likrat Yisrael Aviv, and he went up. Again, not he didn't go, Vayetze, or Vayavo, he came, but specifically he went up to greet Israel, his father, which would again place Goshen between where they are in Egypt and where they're coming from in Canaan, because heading to Goshen would be a process of going up from Egypt, which means you're going towards Canaan, following our previous statements. So Joseph goes up to greet Likrat Yisrael Aviv, to greet Yisrael, his father, and now all of a sudden he's no longer Yaakov, he's Yisrael. And he heads Goshna. He heads toward Goshen to greet his father Yisrael. Vayera elav, vayipol al tzavarav, vayevk al tzavarav od. And he saw him, and he fell on the neck of him, and he cried on his neck more.
Can you show us the
And-
words that go with those?
Can you, do it a little more slowly?
Yeah, so Vaya'al Likrat Yisrael Aviv. So Joseph now we know is the one, the he here, when he went up to greet Yisrael, his father. So far we know Joseph is on his way, Goshna, heading to Goshen to greet his father Yisrael. So Joseph sees his father sees him.
Wait. But could you show us the words?
So, but so far, we simply have Joseph is going up to greet his father.
Yeah.
Toward
got it.
Goshen. Now, Vayera elav. He looked to him, he saw to him, he saw him. Who saw whom? Joseph is coming towards Yisrael, his father, and suddenly he sees him.
It makes it seem from this that it's Joseph who fell on his father.
Well, but if Joseph is coming up to greet his father, then his father must have looked up and saw him coming.
Or that Joseph saw him in the distance.
Yes, or they saw each other in the distance. And therefore, we do not know who's actively doing the seeing of and who's being seen.
Mm.
So there's no reflective that they saw each other.
And it's not Vayitra'o or Vayitra'e, and they saw each other. So it's not the Hebrew form that would give it reflexive.
Mhm.
And it's not he saw him and he looked and saw him. So it's not a statement of one saw and the other saw. It's a statement that one saw one.
And then is the next word fell?
And then the next word, Vayipol, and he fell. Al Savarav, on his neck. So he sees him and he falls on his neck, which is not necessarily the same he and him that did the seeing.
Yep.
So it could be, there's no antecedent noun. These are pronouns with no clear statement. And so, as I often like to say, when we're taking especially Genesis texts and we want to stage them, what do we do with the stage directions in the script, the screen script of verse 29? And that becomes the director's choice when you're
Right.
making the movie, or the commentator's choice when you're studying Torah.
Or you film it twice and see which goes better.
Yeah, yes, we can do the clue version with 3 endings.
Mm.
But we could assume that it could be either and both at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah, so we can read it as he, Joseph, saw his father, and his father fell on his neck, seeing him now coming. And he cried, and Joseph, we're back to Joseph crying.
Was
Or you
there
could
a
read it
part,
as
Where's
one-sided.
cry? Where's cry?
So Vayevk, this one word, Vayevk, is he cried.
Vayek.
was Joseph's eyesight failing him?
Oh, no, that was his dad.
Oh, too bad. Then I could have had that one.
Yeah, you could have, but later we know that his eyesight is very keen when he blesses his grandsons Manasseh and Ephraim,
Yeah.
crosses his hands, and we've got that whole story. But meanwhile, when Jacob and Esau encounter each other and are on each other's neck, it's Vayivku, they are crying.
Well,
Here
what-
now it's Vayipol al Savarav, and he fell on his neck, Vayevk, and he cried, al Savarav, on his neck, Ode, more.
Again,
There's a lot of interpretations here.
Yes, we can read it as Joseph is going up to greet his father. His father sees him. His father falls on his neck. His father cries and on his neck because he's so happy finally to see him. He keeps crying and crying. He cries a lot. Or Joseph is going up and Joseph sees his father and Joseph runs to him and falls on his neck because he hasn't seen him for 13 years. And he cries on his neck on and on and on so much because he's so happy to see him. Or you can switch it back and forth and really have fun. Joseph goes up. Jacob sees Joseph. Joseph falls in his neck. Jacob cries, and it keeps on going.
So why do you think this, when he was redacting this, why did he make it so ambiguous?
Well, most of the time, the editor-redactor does not really add editorial or redactive parenthetical statements.
Oh,
So it was
They-
ambiguous to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. They
Mhm.
take the text as it is and they read it. We do have some indication that in later eras, these things were actually acted out. The Meturgamim were not simply translators, but they were translation interpreters who may have actually done a little bit of playlets when they read these or shared or translated these portions. but the biblical order could have very intentionally left it up to the listener to decide who is the initiator of all of this emotion
Hmm.
and who is the recipient of the emotion. And finally, now we're back to, we know the actor, Vayomer Yisrael. So the beginning of verse 29, we know the actor, it's Joseph going up to greet his father Yisrael. In 30, we know that it's Yisrael now responding to this greeting by saying El Yosef to Joseph. But it doesn't let us know who's doing all the crying, who's doing all the kissing, who's on whose neck, and how long are they doing it. But verse 30 is when they're all done doing their ambiguous interaction with each other, they separate from each other, and Yisrael is able to say to Joseph. And of course, Yisrael's statement is highly emotional, which we can read as an addition to what came before, or as an alternative to. That is, Joseph's doing all the crying, and Yisrael reciprocates with an emotional statement.
Hmm.
So when you choose to write the screenplay for this particular story, you get to pick who does what to whom and when, and for how long.
Hmm.
But verse 30, Vayomer Yisrael El Yosef, and Israel says to Joseph, Amuta hapa'am acharei roti et panav ki odcha chai. So Vayomer Yisrael El Yosef, and Yisrael is now saying to Joseph, Amuta hapa'am, I will die the time.
I will die.
Literally, I will die the time.
Hmm.
So, or this time, or now, hapa'am, now I can die.
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily I will die. The Hebrew doesn't really, in the biblical, doesn't really differentiate between I could die, I will die, I can die. So is it I will die now, or now I could die, now I'm ready to accept death, whenever it might come. Acharei re'oti, after re'oti, my seeing, et panecha, your face, ki od chachai, for yet you live, for more you live,
Hmm.
for you are still alive. For 13 years, I didn't know. I thought you were dead, but I really didn't know. You were MIA, and I was in a limbo of loss,
Hmm.
unresolved grief.
So I have a question, Rabbi. The Torah is supposed to have incredible meaning. Why is it so important that they name the genealogy of a lot of people who have no future meaning in the rest of the Torah? Why is that so important?
It's a good question.
Well,
And we don't know that they don't have meaning in the rest of the Torah just because they're not named in the rest of the Torah. That is, again, what did these names indicate for the later generations who are hearing the story? Because the story is being told as if it happened hundreds of years before the first hearer of the story.
maybe this
Why
story,
this week did we have a whole listing of all of the sons of Esav?
maybe the story isn't supposed to have so much meaning. Maybe it's like a Christian Bible where every generation adds their names.
No, but the Orthodox
It's a
think
history-
that every
history
word
of-
is a gift from God and a meaning.
Right.
So
Well,
I'm
that-
just
that
trying to
was
figure
the-
out. We'll let the rabbi finish. So what were we going to say though about that?
Right. So therefore, yes, if you are in the Orthodox tradition that every word has meaning, then you have to find the meaning in the words that don't seem to have meaning. So by putting it in the way it did, it opens itself to all of the commentary, interpretation, midrash that develops to find the meaning in the words that seem to be meaningless. So the biblical author was probably an ancestor of Viktor Frankl. And the rabbinic commentaries and midrashim knew the text before Frankl wrote it, because Frankl's statement about meaning is not that there is meaning in, but we find meaning from or create meaning in. So we have to put meaning in that which seems to be meaningless. So Frankl actually said suffering is meaningless until we create the meaning out of the suffering. For the biblical audience, which would be different from the Orthodox view if we take the modern liberal form critical view, that these are collected stories from different communities under different times, that there could have been actual stories of these people, all of whom were named by the families that were from that named person. And those stories never made it to other families. They were in, as you said, in the Bible, in their family Bible, and all their genealogies and family trees and everything were in their own family scrolls or records done on very temporary material that did not survive to the larger community. So that the modern form critical approach would say that all of these names of all of these sons of Jacob, the names of the grandsons of Jacob, all were known to somebody within that tribe as this is the town of Chupim. Why is it called the town of Chupim? Because Benjamin's son Chupim was the one who founded the town when the Benjaminites came and accepted their inheritance of that area of the land. So these names, as the Esav names, would have been the names of all the Edomite towns and villages and clans and whatever. These could have been known to the biblical audience as the ancestors of the towns, villages, and clans within the tribal groupings. And that's why the names are given to us as not simply the grandchildren of Jacob, which would make them Bnei Yisrael, but the grandchildren of specific offspring of Jacob, thus indicating their tribal entity.
So do you think people have tried to go back to these communities and tried to trace their ancestral heritage, their genealogy to these towns from who they are now? I mean, do you think people have done that?
I think we're so far removed.
Yeah.
So many destructions of the land. But do I think that it's possible that some of the biblical audience
Did that.
could have gone back and tried find their ancestral home? Who knows? I mean, certainly that seems to be a human tendency. And, we'll see how long the film of Real Pain lasts. And if it's around 2,000 years from now, we will know that somebody actually went back and found their aunt's home in Poland.
I know that if you're Mormon, they try to tell you what tribe you're from.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, because your
Patriarchal
tribe
blessing.
continues after life.
Well, my friend from Nigeria, someone wrote a book about the fact that they thought they were ancestors of the tribe of Dan.
Yes, descendants of Dan. And in fact, some of the tribes of Ethiopia trace their ancestry back to Sheba and Solomon.
But I guess my question is, isn't that typical of other groups that have been very homogeneous over many, many years, that reciting the names of the ancestors isn't necessarily to give those ancestors particular importance, but to acknowledge them to where you are today. Aren't
Yeah, it
there
could
other
be.
groups? I think Icelanders might have done that.
Yeah, I mean,
Remembered long years of genealogy.
exactly. These names are given because they were important to the teller of these stories, and important enough that they became part of the larger story. That is, all of the Danites and the Naphtaliites and the Gadites and the Zebulunites and all of the rest of them, their families would have maintained that story. And enough of their story was accepted by all the others, very possibly because the Danites wanted their family histories to be remembered. And the best way to do that is make sure that they help remember everybody else's too.
Mm.
If you only want to remember yours and you deny everybody else's is going to deny yours, and then none of them will survive.
So in this generation, now, for us to look at the Torah spiritually, all right, trying to deal with that spiritually, is it just, so for me, the only thing I get out of it spiritually is that it's saying that family matters and that genealogy matters and that your heritage has importance. That's the only thing I can now derive from all this stuff that's in the Torah, because otherwise it doesn't have meaning to me other than that.
All right, then that's your
Does that
meaning.
make sense?
Well, for you, that makes sense.
But what else spiritually can you get out of this?
I don't have to ask somebody else who gets something spiritually out of it than that.
Does anyone get anything spiritual
Yeah,
out of that?
and again, there may be a reason why some of the passages have a lot more commentary than others, in that the later commentators said, this part doesn't do anything for me, so I'm not going to comment on it.
Oh,
But
interesting.
yeah, I mean, that would be, for example, if we were to do a more typical kind of Torah study and spend an hour on those, just those, and the Torah study leader might then brainstorm among everybody else. So what do you get out of this? And somebody said, this whole Benjamin thing with the, don't even know whether they were twins or had middle names. I like this idea that that there's no set middle name or no middle name. There's no set guarantee that I have to identify my kids by birth order or by relationship. And in reading this, when Ellie was not yet around and they didn't know whether it was a boy or a girl, we happened to be reading this particular portion, and we said to Ben, how about thinking of either Chupim or Mupim as the name for the child? Or you can, give the child two names, Chupim, Mupim.
Is there anything in the numbers that has turned out to be significant?
And
I just
absolutely,
imagine.
the number 66, the number 70.
Yeah, what's about 70?
Well, 70, of course, is clearly a 7, 10, and 7 is a major important number. And when
Right.
we're in a decimal system, 7 tens would become a very holy number. So we came down in a larger than 40, because 40 is the number for a lot. So we were more than 40. We were a big group. We were a holy group. We were 70. We were 7 teens.
Why is 7 special?
Well, Shabbat. We
Oh,
got that from the Babylonians.
Creation.
So
Day of the
Tomorrow-
week.
Well,
That's
but all of that comes back from the Babylonians like the number 6, and so therefore the next number after 6 was actually the time of dread rather than the time of holiness. We came back from Babylonia, we turned it from the time of dread to the time of holiness.
But to go back to Mona's question, when the story was written down, it was written down as a history, wasn't it?
No, it was written down as a compilation of the stories.
Stories, right?
Right,
That's
but not certainly history in the modern sense is not what they were doing.
okay, but a compilation of stories, and not necessarily for spiritual guidance. The question is, how is it interpreted?
Right.
later?
Yeah, we look at it spiritually. This was written down because this is where we came from.
Yeah,
And
And
we
then-
need to know where we came from.
right. And I think about people sitting around the tents. They're not listening to the radio and they're not watching TV. They're learning their family.
They're listening
names.
to grandpa's stories.
They're learning those names to pass on to their kids.
And when they came to communal events, everybody got to stand up and give the litany of their family story. And the story arc, the communal archivist would memorize all of their litany of genealogies to make sure that none of them is lost.
Right. But the problem is here for me, this is now given to us. Not a problem, but the question that comes up is, this is supposed to be valuable to us now. And that's where I come from. Why
You
why
don't
would I
edit
want
out
to?
anything from the past.
All right, well, yeah,
What?
so I will give you a final thought.
Okay.
Ding.
Yes. This says that no matter how unknown your personal ancestor was, they counted.
Yeah.
Which is what I said before.
Yeah, every person counted.
Every person.
Right.
To
Except the
whether
women.
whether their impact was known or unknown,
Right.
each person counts, which then becomes a statement to you that you count for the future, even if nobody outside of your family remembers you.
Which is what I said, that
Yeah.
his family matters.
Families matter. This is, that I think that's a pretty deep spiritual statement you made.
Mhm. Yeah.
Especially in the present generation.
Yes.
Yes.
People